in these series of landmark and historic hearings on Capitol Hill, nearly a year-long investigation with so many documents poured over and interviews. And today the case, in the words of Zoe Lofgren just wrapping up, that this was a coup in search of a legal theory. And yet the President of the United States was told over and over again by all the president's men, people he had appointed, people that were part of his campaign, that there were no legitimate claims of campaign or voter fraud. Let's bring in our chief election and campaign correspondent, Robert Costa. And Bob, how much of this is about building essentially the case of a conspiracy?
Just a few days ago, the vice chair, Congresswoman Cheney, sat down with CBS News, and she said the committee would outline a conspiracy. Now we are seeing that case being made in vivid detail, and it brings back that phrase from Watergate, all the president's men, people we haven't heard from before. Campaign lawyer Matt Morgan, campaign and White House lawyer Eric Hirschman, telling a story about how then-President Trump embraced a lie, and they ended today by saying that soon to come will be the story of John Eastman, that conservative lawyer who provided Trump with a plan to overturn the election.
Bob Costa on the Hill for us. Thank you. Let's bring in Catherine Herridge now. And Catherine, I know you have been following this investigation. We heard from several members of this committee that they believe that they have compiled enough evidence for the Justice Department to consider a criminal indictment against former President Trump. What are you learning?
Well, Norah, it's a very high bar. I think what's come to the fore in the hearing today is that any investigation will succeed or fail based on the strength and the credibility of the timeline. And congressional investigators have begun this process of laying out a very detailed timeline, beginning on the night of the election itself. According to then Attorney General Bill Barr, that President Trump was already talking about these claims of election fraud. And within days, his then White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had told colleagues that the President, Trump, knew to go not too far and that they felt that he could rein in these claims of President Trump. But what's key here is early December. The Attorney General, as well as the acting Deputy Attorney General, said that they had told President Trump repeatedly that they had looked into the fraud and the allegations and they had found no there. And just bear with me, because December is so important to the most serious charges for January 6th of seditious conspiracy. That involves two groups on the right, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. And what we see in the indictments, the allegation, is that by mid-December, these groups were well advanced in their plans to block the certification of the Electoral College, and the allegation is that those plans were driven in large part by these claims of election fraud by President Trump. Norah.
Catherine Herridge, thank you so much. Let's bring back in Scott MacFarlane, who's covered this so closely. There's been more than 800 people who've been arrested and charged as a result of what happened on January 6th.
For a lot of the people charged in the Capitol siege, the big lie isn't just a piece of history. It remains current reality in their prosecutions. First of all, let me set the scene and show you just how many defendants we have at this point in time. More than 840 people charged. About a third of them have pleaded guilty so far. Fewer have been sentenced, but the Justice Department's been clear. They expect 200 to 300 more arrests, many of them accused of assaulting police. Some of these defendants, when they're in court, Norah, are still arguing the big lie. In fact, some of them are doing it to their own detriment. Let me show you one of the names and one of the faces. This is a man named Coy Griffin. He's a county commissioner from Otero County, New Mexico. He'll be sentenced on Friday. He was convicted earlier this spring. According to the prosecutors, he is still dug in that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. Norah, he is doing that ahead of sentencing at his own peril. He could get a stiffer sentence because of it.
Fascinating. Scott MacFarlane, thank you. Let's bring back in our CBS News cybersecurity expert and analyst, Chris Krebs. And Chris, you were interviewed by the committee. What kind of information were they seeking to learn from you?
Yes, that's right. I interviewed with the committee in December. Frankly, my information, I've been pretty transparent and forthcoming since my time in the administration. So I don't think I necessarily divulged anything new or noteworthy during that interview. Instead, it was laying the the sequencing and the chronology of what we knew as in our election security efforts and in the types of information that we provided to the White House, including the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, that I think the committee is working to use to establish that the Oval Office, the president and his campaign staff knew exactly what was going on out there in the states, that there was no interference, and yet they proceeded with this conspiracy theory.
Chris Krebs, thank you. I mean, the other thing that I'm fascinated by, if I were someone who voted for President Trump, believed what the President of the United States told me, that there was this voter fraud, and I sent him money, because I believe that he had been wronged. $100 million raised in the first week, $250 million in total, and almost none of that money was used for campaign litigation. It went to line the pockets of some of the president's close friends and advisors. What's that? I mean, that's got to anger people.
So you would necessarily be upset about that. You might actually seek recourse. And one of the interesting things about the committee, it's not a prosecuting committee, but it can unveil and disclose evidence. It can also make a recommendation to the Justice Department. That recommendation has some weight, but not a lot. But there is something presented today that lets the Justice Department know there is plenty of evidence to look into to an ongoing fraud campaign. If these people who put out the emails knew, and there's an evidentiary trail that substantiates they knew the claims they were making in these fundraising appeals were false, they are participating in an intentional deception of Trump campaign or Trump supporters and taking money out of their pockets and putting it in theirs.
And to pick up on what Major said, given the tower of evidence today that came from inside the House, they can't possibly have not known. In other words, there was so much evidence you can't base a claim on the idea that the election was stolen. But to your question, Norah, that people might feel ripped off. There are a lot of people with apocalyptic thinking out there and a lot of politicians who sell apocalyptic thinking. And they say basically things are so dire, all bets are off. So with that mindset, what President Trump was doing was just everything he possibly could to fight the apocalypse of the left. With that mindset, that's why these hearings are so vital, because lawmakers stood by and watched. They knew the election wasn't stolen. They did nothing. Now there's all this evidence. Somebody needs to stand up and say rules must be followed, because when they're not, anything goes. And you can't have a government founded on the idea that anything goes.
Stand by. Let's listen in to Congresswoman Lofgren, who is just outside the committee room.
Within the whole time, 2.5 hours of testimony. And, I don't think he particularly wanted to sit here, to be honest, and we didn't think we needed to, because we had all of his testimony from the interview, and it was sufficient.
What was the significance of that? A large part of the presentation was Attorney General Barr laying out not so many terms like Trump didn't believe anything he had to say.
Well, I think the importance is that the Attorney General and other people investigated all of these allegations, and they weren't true. And they directly told the president over and over again they were false. These were his people. This was Trump world telling the president that what he was saying was false. And he continued to say it. So,
and he's the chief law enforcement official for the country, appointed by former President Trump. If you can't believe the person you put in charge of all the law enforcement in the country, who can you believe?
Well, it's not just a matter of belief. I think, as the Attorney General Cliff said in the first hearing, belief that is untethered from any evidence is not of value. The evidence did not support what he was saying, and he continued to say it again.
Mr. Chairman, given Bill Stepien fundraising, can we expect to see any more information about the RNC fundraising beyond just the Trump campaign?
And of course, we have a lot of evidence, and if we laid out all of the evidence of every subject, we'd be here for a long, long time.
Yeah,
so
look at the report. Some of it will be put in the final report. I think what you saw here was just a sampling of a mountain of evidence on a lot of things that we have. But we only have about an hour
Chairman
and a half,
Thompson.
2 hours to present it.
What difference would it have made if Bill Stepien would have been here?
All right, just some final thoughts from the chairman there and Congresswoman Lofgren, who, by the way, happened to be a staffer during the Watergate committee hearings, was also, you may recall, was part of the impeachment hearings, so has a long history of investigating presidents in Congress, well regarded by both parties. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes. And Nancy, what are you hearing from White House officials about what we're hearing today?
Well, Nora, they've made it pretty clear that they are not going to be reacting to every twist and turn in this set of hearings. The president himself did speak on Friday briefly. He said that these hearings are exposing the assault on democracy that was led by the former president of the United States. And typically, this would be a pretty potent midterm election message that this White House would be pushing all the time, arguing to voters, don't reelect Republicans, don't give them the majority in the House or the Senate because they stood by while President Trump pushed these false claims. However, the very same day that President Biden was making that argument, we also got a new inflation report that showed that inflation was even a little worse than economists had expected. And so that has really blunted the White House's ability to push forward this message, because what they've determined is that they really need to be showing the American people that they are focused on the economy and inflation 24/7.
Nancy Cordes, thank you. Of course, that's the other big headline we're following today. The Dow slipping 600 points to start this week, and the S&P falling back into bear market territory. Nicole Killian, we're going to have 2 more hearings this week, right? What will we see?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think you saw a lot of emphasis put on Bill Barr's testimony, and I think you will see the committee continue to build on that by allowing other former Justice Department officials to testify starting Wednesday about the former president's efforts to pressure the Justice Department on how to overturn the election.
Just when it seems that they've already presented so much evidence, there is more to come from all of these depositions and their nearly year-long investigation. Thank you all very, very much. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and we'll have a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington.